Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Leader's Edge. And if you love stories, this is the show for you. We are now in season 3, episode 3, part 5. And don't worry if you missed parts 1 to 4. Just go back to the YouTube channel and watch those 4 segments. I promise you they are all worth your while. He's a devoted husband to Mary Grace and loving father to 3 wonderful kids. And maybe we'll ask June later on the names of those 3 wonderful kids that I'm sure they're well accomplished. But meantime, join me in welcoming to the center stage Mr. June Roy. June Roy, take it away.
Thank you again, Nelson. And again, ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome back. And to those who have just subscribed to the channel, thank you, Nelson, for that introduction. You've been very generous throughout all these sessions. And ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Now, let's go back to our discussion on leadership development in the new normal. We talk about social learning, reflective learning, the importance of curating the experiences and the learning that we have gained as a result of our own reflection. Now, the next one, which is equally important, is storytelling. I remember a time when I was still a kid. I was born with a speech defect. So talking to you now is inconceivable, or it's not something that it's far from my dream. Because all I thought is that speech defect has limited me in so many ways, my self-confidence, my ability to deliver my thoughts. I never knew that one day I would be speaking to audience like you with that speech defect. But there are people in my lives who have mentored me, who have given me confidence. And they said to me that it's just one letter that you cannot pronounce. And how many letters are there in the alphabet? And so that struck me as something like a realization. Yeah, I can do that. And I can tame what is called rhotacism, my difficulty in pronouncing the letter R. And I practice almost daily, especially when I was in college, because it was in college when I had my mentor who taught me about that thing. And so I practice every day, every day. It's like our neighbors are already wondering what is happening in our house. Who is that person who is like talking to someone, but there's really no one there? So I have to recite poetry. I have to have conversations here and there. And that paid off. Slowly, I was able to gain my confidence. And during the time that I ran for presidency in our student council, which I won, I was able to deliver my message, inspired those who are in my audience. And so, what did I gain and learn from that experience of mine? It is this. The mentor that I had has opened my eyes to possibilities. And by taking the risk and believing that I can do something that is difficult, I was able to gain something spectacular, which is my dream of one day speaking to audience like you. So that is a story. And it's my story. And compare that when I teach about difficulty, handling challenges, and I just say that, all right, for you to handle challenges, do like this. Step 1, step 2, step 3. Find a mentor and he will guide you along the way. Which one do you think would land more deeply into the hearts of your learners? Of course, the answer to that is obvious. It's a story. Many of the knowledge, the wisdom that we continue to live by today have been passed on to generations through stories. They stand the test of time. And in that sense, story is the most powerful medium of communication. And so therefore, storytelling, even if it is old and primitive, it hasn't lost its appeal. And through the works of one physicist, David Bohm, and many others, storytelling has found its way into business. And now storytelling is one of the culture that is being built around many organizations. Where I came from before, storytelling is not only an art, but a shared practice. At Nomura Research Institute, storytelling is a part of our weekly lives. We tell stories about our core values. We tell stories about each other so that we can get to know each other. So we harmonize the team around stories. We tell stories to our clients. And when we do strategic planning, we engage them in strategic storytelling. When we ask them to create their vision, we ask them to create their vision around a story. And so storytelling has many applications, and it's one of the most powerful tools that you can include and integrate into your leadership development program. Think about leaders who are able to tell their ideas into a story. What happens to your leaders if they're able to inspire the hearts of their people and engage them? Sometimes it's not easy to engage people with just mere ideas. But when you tell stories that they can relate to and they can see themselves, that's where engagement happens. And so for me and for us in the companies I work with, and especially here in my current company at Nomura Research Institute, we believe in the power of story because it is tried and tested. It works thousands of years until now. And so how do we do this? There are many ways. One is whenever you are illustrating a concept like what I did not illustrate the concept of mentoring or getting out of the difficulty through ideas. I told a story. So when you illustrate concepts, wrap around that concept in a story. I also do a lot of what I call story sprints. So when there are ideas or concepts like vision, performance goals, about difficulties, about being proactive, I divide the participants into, let's say, several groups of 3 or 4, depending on the time. And each is given 2 minutes to tell a story. And so that becomes like a story sprint because they go around the room. After each round, they move. And it's a beautiful sight to behold. And with this new normal, we can also do that during Zoom breakout rooms, where each breakout room can tell a story, and then later on, they can hop from one room to the next. So that's a story sprint. Told you about the vision story. And when you create a platform, meaning in your company, like what we do at NRI, where storytelling is part of our weekly lives, and it's part of what we do and how we do business, then you can engage your leaders so that when you teach them about storytelling during the training, when they go back, there is a platform and the environment is ready for them. And so storytelling is one of the effective tools by which leaders can learn leadership and touch others through their stories.
That's a great story. Thank you very much, June. And I just wonder several things. For example, for the appreciation of the audience, what is it about stories that are more effective than cold, hard lectures?
Good question, Nelson. Why is it that the wisdom of the ages that we still imbibe and articulate today stood the test of time? So there's something there about story. It's about the way our mind works, and it's about how our brain are wired. They are wired to remember stories. because stories is holistic. They are not, you can say, a chunk unrelated to each other. They make a part of the whole. So it's easy for us to remember stories rather than concepts. Like bullet points concepts, they don't make a part of the whole. There's no storyline there. So even for us, when we prepare our materials, there has to be clear storyboard or storyline there. So it's just the way how our mind works. That's the quick question to that, Nelson.
And actually, I'm thinking that stories are everywhere, not just in the corporate setting. For example, every time I go home and meet my darling wife, one of the things she'll say, "Cuento naman." Please give me a story of how your day went. And even in churches, we have people telling about their stories. Like they used to be a drug addict, now Jesus Christ cleaned it up, that sort of thing. I just wonder in that case, but I'm not a drug addict. I was not an abused child. I have a boring childhood. What story can I possibly give? Can you answer that?
Interesting question. So the answer to that is first a question. Should a story be dramatic? Should it really be all about a struggle in life that you have to go through? Not necessarily. There are a lot of interesting stories there, which is not wrapped around with so much pain and so much agony, like probably what I've gone through or what others have gone through, but there are still stories. And they create a metaphor of sort that people can actually remember. So I'll give you an example of that. One time I was I was buying something. It's like, I think if I remember it right, it's mango. So I was asked by my wife to buy several pieces of mango, right? And when I gave the mango, I hope and I thought she will like it. And I was surprised in our language, hindi naman to yung pinabili ko eh. This is not what I asked you to buy. I thought you told me mango. No, ripe mango. I bought not a ripe mango, but a green mango. So what did I learn there? It's about paying attention to details. It's about the ability to listen well. It's about challenging your own assumption and testing your assumption. Did I listen right? Is it really that well? And there's no shame in asking again. Now, Nelson, tell me, is there something melodramatic with that? How ordinary that can be. It's a very ordinary situation that probably other people can relate to. But when we use what we in Toastmasters do, story, message, game, then you make a sense of what is happening to you. So in a way, reflection, curation of experiences, and storytelling are interconnected. Because when you reflect with what is happening to your experience, you can form into your mind a storyline following what we in Toastmasters use, which is, what is a story? Now, is there anything that I can learn from this or associate this with? What did I gain from this, or what can I gain from this? So that is an illustration of how ordinary situations can become a storyline, and we can put analogy there, and we can learn a lesson from ordinary stories. So extraordinary learnings, Nelson, and ladies and gentlemen, can sometimes come from ordinary events in our lives. It's just how, or a matter of how we make sense of it.
And that's pretty powerful because I'm beginning to piece together the different segments. Like, for example, now you'll be curating experiences in the form of stories where you now reflect and find out what will be the key point or the takeaways, and then probably share them even in the context of social learning. I love the way how things get together. And ladies and gentlemen, in case you're wondering about Toastmasters, it is a global organization dedicated to help people like you and me how to become better public speakers and leaders. Check it out offline. Now, I like to have this other thing, and this may be a bit too basic, but humor me here. What are the elements of good storytelling?
All right, that's a good question. I usually develop what I call a story canvas, and I ask my audience or my participants to write their story around or using that canvas. And for the sake of for them to be able to remember it well and easily, I use different C's. So in every story, there is a campaign, a goal, what is there to be achieved. In my previous story, it's about being able to deliver my talk, my ideas, to become a speaker. In that ordinary story, it's about buying mango for my wife. That's a campaign. All right. And within a story, there's always that character. There is conflict in a story, and there is a climax to the story. There's also the context prior to that. Context is the background, the setting. So these five C's, of course, there can be more, are the basic structure of your story. Another C that wraps it all around is, I can say the word compelling. That means you find and you structure your story so that it can become compelling. Compelling in the sense that if I heard this story, I can relate to it. I can form some ideas already in my mind. So in that sense, it is compelling. It compels me to reflect on my own. I see myself in that story. So all these five C's will lead you to that other C, which is compelling. And when you achieve that, then that means you have told your story successfully.
That's great because I'm accessing what I learned about storytelling, and yeah, it makes a great guide. And like for example, I heard tips about if you want a compelling story, you may want to raise the stakes, what will be at it for the hero if he loses, that sort of thing. And what I like is that sometimes the story may have to show the transformation of the hero and therefore what we can get from them. I just wonder how is this now the trend in the Philippine corporate setting? I've heard about it being the trend in the US where they have even boardrooms talking about stories or fundraising using stories or even let's say motivating people using stories. I just wonder how it is now catching in the Philippines.
All right. Unfortunately, it has not yet been practiced massively by many companies, but big companies like where I came from before, the Aboitis Group, I was part of that. Storytelling is, I can say, a culture. In our company at Nomura Research Institute, it is a culture already. In bigger organizations, I knew they have started embracing the art of storytelling, but it is still something that needs to be embraced by many other organizations. One clue, just type a storytelling seminar in the Google in the Philippines. You wouldn't find too many options there, right? But in my mind, all visions and all strategic planning must end up with a story because our experiences, especially with NRI, when we teach our clients to become storytellers in the way they communicate their vision and their strategy, they're able to engage their audience, their subordinates, the management, their stakeholders, much more one compared to when they articulate only ideas. Every change management must be told in a story. There's a storyline in the change that we want to happen in any organization. One of the problems that we encounter as an OD practitioner is that our change that we want to implement in organization sounds fuzzy, intimidating, and if I am the audience, I don't see myself in that story. Or if I see myself in that story, it's scary. So how do you make people see themselves in the change that they are part of the story and the ending is a beautiful story? So it's a loss if companies in the Philippines don't adopt the most powerful communication tool available that is tried and tested thousands of years ago. And so it's my advocacy actually that storytelling should be part of every organization's way of communicating. Because my take, Nelson, is a bit deeper. If leaders are able to engage their people well, organizations prosper and grow, right? And if all these organizations prosper and grow, think about the impact of these companies to our economy. Think about the kind of people that these subordinates would become. Think about the leaders, how the character that can be formed when they tell a story. It has an empowering effect there. And think about what kind of fathers they would become when they tell stories, because when they tell story, it has that empowering effect. And so it may be far-fetched, but I truly believe that if we are able to engage the hearts of people, make them better performers, better people, we can live in a better society and in a more prosperous country.
And that is a powerful statement because imagine if our government leaders know how to make great stories to motivate patriotism, selflessness, service to the country, that sort of thing. And I'm already beginning to appreciate your talk, June, because I'm thinking this is not just for CEOs, but let's say I run two plants. This can also be for the supervisor to motivate his machine operator. I'm just wondering, it's like this. We talk about vision statements to be the preferred supplier of this and that and that. But that's too abstract. And I think that's where the flow is. They're not so sticky. So I wonder how you're going to be able to have stories out of vision statements or core values. That will be my last party shot for you.
All right, that's a good question. In fact, instead of the vision, I forgot to tell that one of the most common question that I ask is during, let's say, a coaching session, and I ask the person, I invite him to reflect on the story of his life. And it's not about his past or current story, but the future story. So my question would somehow would run like, all right, so think about 3 years from now, you become a leader and you will tell stories to your kids, to your subordinates. What story would you tell them about you in terms of the impact that you have made for your organization, for your people? Or sometimes when they go through some negativities and I ask them challenging questions, all right, this is the path you are taking, right? And this is going to be your storyline. Is that the storyline you are going to live with? What alternative storyline do you think it's possible for you? So there are many ways of applying that, but it's very powerful, especially in coaching sessions, when you ask people to see themselves in the context of what is their current story versus their future story. It's very powerful, tried and tested.
And thank you, June Roy, for reminding all of us we each have a story to tell. And thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We are in the final stretches of this fantastic series, Leadership Development Under the New Normal. And if you love this series, spread the story of how much you've learned and was inspired by this series. Click like and share and subscribe to the YouTube channel over here. We will have the last part. And yes, parting is such sweet sorrow, but we are serving also fantastic material. Part 6 and the next future episodes of The Leader's Edge, where learning is a never-ending journey with limitless vistas. Join us again for this final episode. Don't miss it. And we'll have a concluding event, no less by our master trainer, Mr. June Roy. I'm Nelson D. and have a wonderful Christmas and a fantastic New Year.